Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.
Welcome to Living the Solution with Dr. Elena George. Today we have a very important show on, one that I think everybody, whether you're an adult or whether you have a child in school or whether you're going to have a child, this information that we're going to speak about is timely, and I think people don't know exactly what's going on. The COVID crisis has uncovered a lot of things, and one of the things that I think parents are probably uniquely aware of is what's been going on in terms of their child's education. Now they have to be more involved. Now they may have seen things they didn't know, and I think I've heard, and I want our guests to expound on that. There seems to be a growing number of parents who now want to homeschool their children, and that's been, I think, a bone of contention from the Department of Education beginnings to now with Common Core and No Child Left Behind and all these administrative platforms and programs that have come online. One thing I've noticed is that I don't feel that people who are much younger than myself are really well educated, and it seems to be more of a social issue or a social avenue as opposed to straight arithmetic and science, etc. And today we're having Miss Lynne Taylor come today. She calls herself the Common Core Diva, and this is someone who can speak to our education system with knowledge. Just like medicine, I find that the healthcare system has been commandeered by people who aren't doctors, trying to tell us what we should be and how we should create and craft the system. My mom was a teacher, and so I'm very sensitive to how teachers and how important teachers are. And it seems to me, Ms. Taylor, that the education system has been outsourced as well to administrators who've superimposed their will on what education should be and the curriculum and how children need to be tested. And I wanted to get you to come on to give us the insider view of what's going on and why. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. George, and it is quite an honor to be with you and your guests.
Well, let's start off at the beginning. I mean, you've now retired, I understand, but how long did you teach?
I taught 23 years.
And what kind of what was the age group of the students that you taught?
Well, I actually homeschooled all of those years. So
Awesome.
That's what got me into this Common Core fight, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that it was coming at the homeschoolers, and I wanted to know, how do I protect my children, and how do I protect those children of all the other homeschooling families that I had come in contact with? And so when I saw that, I was like, well, wait a minute. There's got to be more to this if it's coming after homeschooling. Well, that's been about 10 years ago, and now we're seeing that it has totally infiltrated homeschooling to the point that the Every Student Succeeds Act is now overreaching and trying to get control of what the parents are teaching and having it aligned to the same Common Core state standards. Now, Common Core supposedly was killed by the Every Student Succeeds Act, but actually it was rebranded into College and Career Readiness. And if you look on your state's Race to the Top applications, you might even still be able to see up under the Common Core state standards the name College and Career Readiness. So it's just been rebranded time and time again.
Well, my question really is, who created Common Core? How did that come online? I mean, it was it wasn't centralized. It was, the school systems having their teachers create their curriculum, and it was very individualized in terms of, I guess, from a state to a county level. How did it get taken away and made so centralized?
Okay, Common Core was never individualized. It was board. It is copyrighted by both the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers. You can trace the roots of Common Core back to the United Nations, and that was an agreement that Bill Gates entered into with the United Nations to create a one world curriculum. So we've seen Common Core come from a global aspect, and so this has been a major top-down squashing of our education.
I'm actually kind of surprised and shocked, not, and I could say even appalled that Bill Gates is now or has been involved with education. We know from the healthcare perspective how much power he's had over medications, vaccines specifically. But education, I mean, that's pretty crazed. Yes.
Well, it's really not just Bill Gates. We have a lot of the people like George Soros and the Rockefellers and Goldwater and all these big names that have been in corporate America. They are the ones who are taking education and just ruining it. It's all about workforce training is what it is. And if you look at the Every Student Succeeds Act on page 17, it does state that all education has to be aligned to the same post-secondary readiness standards as laid out in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So, Dr. George, what that really means is that Johnny and Susie aren't being taught to read for pleasure. They're being taught to read very basic, simple things to barely become educated, not to think, not critically, not to read, not to know how to put a sentence together, not even how to add. They're just going to be worker drones. And that is exactly what is so troubling about what we're seeing. And as you said, you look at some of the younger generations and you wonder, why are they not learning? Well, because they're not being taught.
And, the next segue to that, if it is the big business and corporate America and this UN approach to everybody being the same, then, the question has to come into play. How do the parents get aced out of this system? Because I don't think most parents know that this is what their child is being taught. How do they get removed like this?
Parents are being left out of all kinds of conversations, and this has been going on for years. They're being treated worse in this than the teachers. Now, the teachers are getting a pretty raw deal, too, so for the parents to be even more excluded. And the reason is because if they don't know what's going on at the school, then the school can just do whatever they want with the children. I don't know about in some places across the United States, but this is an eye-opener. It was for me. And that is the minute your child steps on the school property, you are no longer that child's authority. The school is.
That's shocking. Is that new?
That is.
Or has that always been the case?
This has been ramping up for years, and I'm going to say that it is fairly recent, but that push has really come into focus now. And we found some of this out when you started having some of the school shootings and the schools would go on lockdown and parents would go and try to retrieve their children and be told, no, you can't because, they're still on our property. They're still on our watch and you, the parent, are denied. I think that is just absolutely not only immoral, but it should be criminal.
Oh, I don't disagree with that at all. This is such a dense concept. I want to take our first break and come back because you mentioned the teachers and you guys have been under siege for quite a while. I love for people to understand how that's affected teaching. And if we can take our first break, we'll pick that up when we come back. You're living in the solution. Welcome back to Living the Solution. We're speaking with Miss Lynne Taylor, Common Core diva, and an educator, homeschooling parent who understands the pathway that we've taken to get to this point, which was pretty shocking, where parents technically are losing control of their children. And as soon as they enter that school building, they're being hit with all sorts of forces that we all need to know about, because it's about shining the light on a problem. Now, we talked briefly about how parents are being removed from this equation, but I've seen, my mom was a teacher, as I said. I have friends who are teachers, and they've just been It's like their will almost has been sapped. My mom, when she finally retired, she almost had PTSD. It was being thwarted from taking care of her students and teaching them. It was always what she couldn't do. Social promotion, all sorts of, behavioral issues in the classroom that is not always safe. I mean, she taught in New York public school system. So from a teaching standpoint, you're an educated professional. You know how to perform your craft. It must be devastating to have something come in and tell you it's wrong. Stop doing X and Y. How did it present to you? Because I assume that you know other teachers who were in the system and you must have compared notes. What's it like for being a teacher that really cares?
It's a gut-wrenching nightmare is what it's become. And these are people who this is all they've ever wanted to do was to teach, and what is teaching? Teaching is you're inserting knowledge into another person's life. And there are thousands of ways to do that. It's not just through an online computer program. It's not just through a book. It's not just through pictures. It's through so many different things because we all learn differently. But what this Common Core or college career readiness has done is it has streamlined education, and the goal is to go from preschool all the way until you're an adult with some sort of indoctrination, whether it's for social justice now or whether it's for, what sexuality you are or, this is not what history is, somebody's over here rewriting it. And so you're right. It's a bunch of garbage. It goes against the morals of what most teachers really want to do with their students, and they can't do it because their hands are so tied. And we have so many teachers who this is their income. And they don't want to have to teach the way they're teaching. They don't like it, but they have to, go because that's their income. And let me give you an example. My oldest, when she graduated college, she was in psychology, but we saw all the School of Education. They were graduating their students as well. And she told me, she said, "Mom, the only way that they taught those kids in their classes and their courses was to teach to Common Core or teach to a test." And every one of those people were sobbing as they left the classroom because every bit of what they wanted to help impart to other people was toast.
Man, that's soul killing, really. And from an education standpoint and the legacy that teachers, the power of the legacy that teachers have. I mean, I still remember things I learned back in grade school. And it wasn't just, as you're right, it wasn't just education. It was how to behave. How do you fit in terms of moral, ethical framework? That's all important. I don't think that's being taught anymore. And if we look at some of the things, and maybe you can, confirm or deny this for me, it seems a lot of the children are learning how to snitch. I hate to put it that way, but I remember stories about how their parents didn't turn the lights off. They were coming after them. And this has got real consequences to it because now we have defects that can come into play where the school is empowered to call the defect system in whatever state you're in, and you have to defend yourself. And I don't think that's very easy.
No, it's not. It's known as social and emotional learning, and it is absolutely an attack on the child's way of thinking. And what we're seeing is, you're right, it is snitching. There are assessments that these kids are having to take. Has somebody hurt me? Does somebody in your house smoke? Does somebody in your house drink? Are you ever touched inappropriately? Some of these questions are given to children who don't even understand what those things are. And they're supposed to answer those, or they're supposed to be able to now view the school as a safe place because, home is so awful. Well, I know that is true for some people, but to across the board, Dr. George, test everyone to this sort of thing, to label everyone as a behavior problem so that they can get mental health services when they may not need them, that takes away from the folks who really do need them. And that also takes our tax money and abuses it.
Well, let's talk about that, because if there is an emotional, some sort of diagnosis being made, I'm not hearing a physician anywhere in this equation. Are these...
And you won't.
Well, who's
the
making...
teachers.
Oh, my.
The teachers are having to go in and play doctor, nurse, and psychologist in the schools that don't have these. Now, I grew up in a public school system. We didn't even have a nurse. Our county was so poor, we did not have a school nurse. If we got hurt, we called mom or dad, and they would come and get us. Or you'd go to the principal's office, and the secretary would help you, you know. Now, if it was really, really bad, of course, you know, they'd call the ambulance or something like that. But to sit there and have these children as young as kindergarten start taking these mind-bending tests and questionnaires so that they can be labeled a behavior problem when all they're being is a 5-year-old?
Exactly.
That's ridiculous. And what's being used is the positive behavior intervention system, multi-tier support systems, and they're, again, from preschool up. And in some places, if they have their way about it, they're going into the hospital as soon as the babies are born. And we know that Senator Lamar Alexander, way back in the 80s, gave a speech to the National Governors Association. And in that particular speech, Dr. George, he clearly said, one day we will be able to go into the hospital where the moms just had the baby, and we can take both of them and we can educate them, we can clothe them, we can feed them, we can do everything through a governmental lens. And that is exactly where we are right now. And this COVID nightmare has really driven this point home.
Man, that doesn't sound like it's a society that you want to live in, where there's this uniformity, where being an individual is frowned upon. Somehow you're a disruptor. And again, this is seems to me to be a template almost. And I can speak from a healthcare side. If a doctor is in a hospital and they don't want to give they want to give a medication that's off the formulary, or they want to try to treat a patient that's off the protocol, and they keep insisting on it, they're going to be labeled a disruptive physician, and they can be dinged with peer review. And it seems like it's this mindset that's pervading the entire society. But, you know, we're the people who are over 40 and 50 are the outliers, because we did not grow up this way. We don't have that mindset of someone tells me what to do and I do it. But it seems to me that they're working very hard on the younger generation if they don't know what we do, right? If they don't know there's an alternative way of thinking about things, a critical way of thinking, not just wanting to be liked and being uniform. If they educate that out of these children, what's it going to look like, in your opinion?
Well, it's not going to be very pleasant, I can tell you that, because everyone's going to be afraid to be themselves because, you know, you can't stand out. You can't question. Well, I disagree. You should be able to stand out. You should be able to question. I taught my children question everything because that's what I was taught. And it's not to be arbitrary. It's because you want to learn. You want to find out why you believe what you believe, not just repeat it because so-and-so told you that that's what you need to think. And that's what we're seeing happen. The kids are not being taught how to think. They're being told what to think. And that to me is a very dangerous precedent for society. And it's going to be a really awful place to live. And, you know, again, this COVID crisis that we're in is showing us some of the uglier sides of what's going on.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's being rolled out in a way that it's such an emotional negative connotation that's being foisted on people. So like you have a question about wearing a mask, for example. Oh, you want everybody to die. It's not like it's a simple, well, that's your choice. I choose to, so okay, live your life. It's not that anymore. It takes the next level of you actively want to hurt somebody. You're the problem. And nobody wants to put themselves in that argument because we're human and we don't want to make a wave unless we really have to, most of us. But in that process, we're going down a path that at some point we won't even have an option of making a wave.
Right. Absolutely. And there was an author a couple of weeks ago wrote a blog, and I don't know the blog's name, but it was a thought about, you know, in the current situation that we're in, it's not save the economy or save a life, because this situation has impacted every aspect of our lives. Mm-hmm. So why apply an A or B option when there are so many other caveats to this entire situation? So you're right, to be able to have that argument, it's like, no, I really don't want to hurt somebody, but I ought to be able to choose if I want to or if I don't want to wear a mask,
Oh, absolutely. From a science basis, I think the argument of herd immunity is now being pushed forward as another alternative. Mm-hmm. And right. If you're thinking about anything critically, if you have herd immunity, if you took your immunization and I choose not to, why does that bother you? Because you're technically covered by your immunization, aren't you? I mean, there's no critical, pathway of, you make a critical or thought or idea and you have proof and theories to back it up. It's just an emotional Pavlov response. No, you have to, or I'm going to die. You're the worst person in the world. And the children are so vulnerable. That is abusive, in my opinion. To have a child.
Oh, it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, I'm sure you do too, you're in school and you put your hand up, you had an idea, maybe it wasn't the right response, but your teacher didn't smack you down and you would never raise your hand again, would you?
Oh, no, absolutely not. It just appalls me that we're not having more conversations about this so that parents can get informed about what is actually going on or actually what is being taught. And the parents really don't have an opportunity. You want to know why textbooks are disappearing? It's not because the schools are running out of money. It's because the data tracking through the computer that pigeonholes the children into what courses they'll take. It daily assesses them. It's daily measuring their biometrics. These are all things that violate their civil rights.
I had no idea it was to that level of data mining.
Oh, it is. It is. The data mining is absolutely horrid.
So imagine what COVID-19 would bring for the rest of us, because they want to expand that to everybody else with contact tracing and not just, questionnaires, but you're going in a database. So this is huge. Let's take our second break because this is a huge topic and I want to get back into and discuss the funding. This is not just happening out of the blue. There's money, I think, being poured into this template, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's revisit that and talk when we come back. You're living in the solution. Welcome back to Living the Solution with Dr. Elena George and my guest, Miss Lynne Taylor, Common Core Diva. I think you've done a really excellent job of explaining the foundation of this and the consequences. But as we both know, it's always about follow the money, right? So I know that my tax dollar, my property tax isn't paying for all of this with the data mining and all this other thing. So who's coming up and who's providing all the funds for these? This is a very ambitious project that reaches the entire country. So who's paying for this?
Well, unfortunately, most of our tax dollars are being used against our will to fund a lot of this. I mean, the CARES Act, we had, I think it was $300 billion thrown at education. I'd have to go back and verify that. I know with this HEROES Act that just passed the House, they want $175 billion to throw at education. And what's happening is a lot of that is going for the digital online data mining, changing the infrastructure so that, everybody can keep up with it where everybody is, because during this time, we know that you're at home, but we don't really know what you're learning. Mm-hmm. So if we're hooking you to a computer, then we're going to know what you're learning. That's a little creepy to me. But we also have what's known as public-private partnerships, Dr. George, and that is a really big deal because public-private partnerships are fascism. And we're seeing this overreach from a federal level down to the local level. And we're seeing our current administration loves public-private partnerships. Mm-hmm. That's not good because what that allows is private money to be used for public purposes, but the public doesn't get to weigh in. This is why parents really need to know this so that they can start weighing in. If we're not going to be at the table we might as well be on the menu, so to speak, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to be in these conversations. We've got to have these conversations. And what I'm not seeing any candidate talk about, from the current president to all the wannabes, okay? No one's talking about real education. What they are talking about is education for the national economy or education for the job force. This is not so Johnny and Susie can just excel and be who God made them to be and work where they want to work. I mean, you're not on, okay, I know when I went to school, I didn't think I was going to be a teacher. It's not the first job I've had.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think what you do is the first job you've ever had. We had to go through different jobs to find what we wanted, what suited us. But no more. No, the child has to come out of the system somehow already prepared so that the industry can thrive. What's wrong with that picture?
It sounds like the novel Brave New World is what it sounds like. Everybody is, from the time you're born, you're pigeonholed into something, and they educate you to fit that and nothing more.
Right.
And if you want something more, then there's a problem, or they're going to have to medicate you out of it.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't sound. Oh, it's nauseating, honestly. So I'm not happy to hear that the current administration is moving down the same path. It seems like they just changed the name and doing the same thing. So, the current Secretary of Education, was it Betsy DeVos? What is she doing? I mean, I kind of like let me give you one thing I like is what she done. What's come out is that they're no longer putting men in harm's way with being accused of being rapists without proof, right? So that college thing where someone can just say that you've attacked them and you just get rode out on a rail without any due process, I don't think is a good idea. And I think that they've changed that. So I'll give one good thing. Tell me what's going on in the real world that's bad.
Well, Betsy DeVos is an absolute train wreck as far as my research has proven. She has her job because she donated money to the current administration. She's done it with the vice president's campaign through her family. She's done it under President Trump to his campaign with her married name. And to me, it just smacks of, okay, I paid my $2 million. Let me have a job. And so she's so unqualified to do what she's doing. She's not ended Common Core, as she has said. She has extended it. She has extended the overreach of federal government to the point of she's gone to every country she can possibly go and signs agreements to get Americans to act just like everyone else in the world with education. She's a big liar, and she's got big money, and she is actually personally profiting from some of the student data mining that's going on. This to me is so criminal, and yet she's being allowed to have a secretarial position in an unconstitutional department.
That's frightening, actually. I mean, because the whole mindset was we want to allow people choice. We want parents to be able to have charter school, homeschool. So this would be whatever worked for you. And that was the rhetoric that they were going to support it and get rid of this top-down approach, UN-driven system. That's very disappointing to hear that.
No, she is doing everything she can to extend it, as well as the current administration. Previous administration did too, okay? It's not that I'm picking on one party, because I don't belong to either party, because they're the same. When it comes to education, there is no difference between a Republican platform and a Democratic platform. And I have research that proves that.
Well, I know there's a big socialism aspect to education. The social justice side of it, and I don't think that serves anybody. With everybody being the biggest victim and demonizing the country just separates us as opposed to bringing us together. I don't know if and I agree with you. I think both parties are the same. To tell you the truth, this is the rhetoric. But I was hoping that we would stop this divide and conquer mentality. And the textbooks, I know that's another issue where they've cleaned certain sections of the textbook, especially for history.
Right.
If you don't know your history, that axiom, you're going to repeat it, it certainly comes true. And it doesn't make anybody better. I mean, now it's the Me Too movement. It's always something. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems the antidote to this is for parents to take their power back and to homeschool their children and educate them completely.
Absolutely. But what we're seeing happen, Dr. George, is that the longer that Every Student Succeeds Act is on the books, okay, and it's egregious to the Constitution, so it really shouldn't even be on the books because, we're not supposed to honor egregious laws. We really aren't. But we see millions of people doing it because that's what we've always done. We've always sent our kids to school, and we've been told, well, you're a parent, you wouldn't know how to teach. Well, that's wrong because the way it was brought up to me, because I was convinced that I couldn't homeschool, okay? And the mentor that I had, she looked at me and she goes, I'm going to ask you some questions. And I said, okay. She goes, who taught your children how to tie their shoes? And I thought, well, now that's a dumb question. I did,
Yeah.
And then she goes, and who has taught them how to use the bathroom? And I said, well, my husband and I. And then I'm like, where is this woman going with all this? I don't understand. And then she asked me, okay, who taught them how to eat? I said, well, my husband and I did. What is your point? She goes, those are 3 of the hardest life skills that any human will ever have to learn. And you have successfully taught all your children to do those things that will serve them well for the rest of their lives. In relation, what is spelling, or what is English, or what is math? And when she put it that way, I was like, well, they're important, but they're not near as important as, the life skills that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And it was revolutionary to me. And I've shared that story with countless people. And it is, when you think about what the parents are supposed to do, it's really, yes, you can do it. And you don't need the government's say so. You don't need the government resources. You don't need the free, and that's the thing. A lot of homeschoolers like to use free resources. Well, going back to where the money goes in that you ask about, community-wide alignment was a mandate in the Every Student Succeeds Act, so that if you took your kid out of the system, you didn't really take them out of the system because they're still using the community resources like the library. It's aligned, It also data mines. You've got all these, and I hate to say it, but churches are even getting in on this with the after school programs and things like that. And it's like, wait a minute, weren't your churches supposed to be a place where, your pastor was your protector and, that sort of thing? And no, we're seeing churches, because they need the money, they're going to go in and take the federal dollar. And when you take the federal dollar for anything related to education, including health care, you have just had them put their foot in the door to your life.
Wow. Let's take our last break and revisit that. That's a mouthful statement. We'll come right back. You're Living the Solution.
You're listening to Living in the Solution with Dr. Elena George, Healthcare Consumer Advocate. If you missed the show, you can listen to it on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and a host of multimedia platforms.
Welcome back to Living the Solution. We're speaking with Miss Lynne Taylor, and people should go to her website, commoncorediva.com. And she has a Facebook page by the same name. She's written multitude of blogs. She has live Facebook video as well. And it's keeping everybody up to date. And it's fun and it's informative. And it'll really make you think. And I highly recommend it. Now, Ms. Taylor, before the break, we were talking about the government and money spent. Now, you mentioned something that perked my ears as a doctor. How is schools becoming health centers? I mean, that doesn't even, there's no doctor involved with this, and they're getting money.
Right. Okay. In the Every Student Succeeds Act, your Title I funding, and Title I was supposed to be for low-income students, and it was supposed to fit the per pupil need. Well, in the Every Student Succeeds Act, that funding stream alone got reformulated to go from a per pupil need to a whole school need. And the reason was to certify the school as a health center so that they could offer the mental health services. Because after all, if you're going to, as they call it, educate the whole child, you have to be able to get into their minds. And so this is where that social and emotional learning that we talked about earlier is really coming in. And this is where those diagnostics are coming in for the children. And they've turned the school into what's known as a quasi-hospital. It's a federally recognized health center, so therefore it has to offer health care services that are wraparound, not just for Johnny and Susie, but for Johnny and Susie's brother and sister and aunt and uncle and mom and dad and you name it, because the school is supposed to be a hub of government services for your entire family. I mean, this is why the Department of Education has these family ambassadors. This is why we're seeing the Department of Education team up with the Department of Health and Human Services and overreach into the family. Because if you're not educating the family in the way that the government thinks, well, then the government has to come in and teach you how to be a better parent, because after all, you're not doing a good enough job if you're not aligning to what their belief system is supposed to be for your family. Well, that totally cuts out my personal choice of family values, doesn't it?
It totally does. And it actually removes the family as part of the equation. You just get totally sliced out of the picture. So now
Right.
I understand now. Where in California, that health system, or that was the power of the school to go around the parents and give children contraception. Even day after pills, etc. is now
Right.
It makes sense. And now it also makes sense why during the COVID crisis, if you test positive, then they're going to take your children away because it's, quote, a health issue. This is
Right.
crazy. I mean, my God, it's like somebody's just decided that you don't matter, that your child is no longer yours.
Right. And that's exactly what we're supposed to think. In our eyes, parents are nothing more than breeders.
God. So I guess that mantra of "it takes a village" is no joke. I mean, they kind of give these little mild euphemisms at the beginning, like they're so benign, but they're telling you what they're going to do, aren't they?
Well, and this is why they love to play word games with us, because when we hear one word, we think of it in the positive way. Okay? Like Every Student Succeeds Act. That sounds so positive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. Every student's going to succeed. Well, it's the exact opposite. Every student is going to be undermined. Every family is going to be overruled. Every citizen is going to be in this particular chain system, if you will, because that's exactly what the point is. That's why you're seeing the very fabric of our nation erode right before our eyes, is because we have so sold out to the United Nations member state. Yeah, that's exactly why you're seeing it, because everyone has to conform. Everyone has to be a good little citizen. Everyone has to be, ratting on their neighbor or spying on their parents or turning their parents in because, they didn't hold their mouth right. But, in at least 26 of the states, there are laws on the book, Dr. George, I kid you not, that are built to destroy the family through education. And what I mean by that is, if you have an authority come into your home for a well visit or whatever, mm-hmm. okay, if it's proven that you are failing to properly educate your child, guess what? You either are punished with a fine or maybe some jail time, or you could lose your children altogether. If I don't educate my children in the way the government thinks, that I ought to educate? What does that say to my Bill of Rights or my life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that's in the Declaration of Independence? What happened to, the federal government has no business in education?
It gets swept under the rug. But you know what's even more disgusting? If this system is so awesome, how come these children can't read? They can't write? They can't understand math? What is it? The average passing rate is so low in some of these states. They're not doing a good job either. You know what? I take that back. Maybe they are, which is to make people who are drones, who don't have the critical skills to know when they're being used and abused and to like it.
Right.
This is what they're doing.
And that's the point. So it's not they're failing. No, they're succeeding in exactly what they wanted to do, and that was to create an entire nation of minions. Mm-hmm. But I know that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to fight back, and I will be among them, because I am not going to stand by and see that happen, nor will I be that one who bows.
I love how you think. So for those parents who are now getting a taste of what's gone on with their children, what do you recommend that they do to start the process of reversing this mind control and the power of the system?
Right. What I would do is I would say get involved at a local level. Have conversations with those local leaders. Start showing up at the meetings. Start writing letters to the editor. Hey, did you know this is going on? I mean, my blog is free. And the reason I keep it free is because I want to give you the ammunition that you need to arm yourself so that when you go to these local meetings, you can say A, B, C, and D means A, B, C, and D, and it's not right what you're doing, that sort of thing. So, all that information is there. I've been doing the blog since 2014. It's jam-packed with all kinds of information, and it's there for anyone to use. But I would say start having those conversations. Start looking at what your state's doing. Get to know the education laws in your state. Are they in your favor or are they not? Find out from your congressmen and women, why are they supporting unconstitutional and taxpayer abusive measures? Why are they creating legislation that honors the corporate instead of we the people? Mm-hmm. As far as your candidates, if education is not one of their platform issues, and I mean real education, like the classic education where you can read, you can write, you can do math, you can critically think, not this, hey, I'm just going to barely educate you so you can go get a good job somewhere and make money. Because, any nation that continues to do what we're doing, which is putting economy before people, that's wrong.
I absolutely agree with that one. I can't argue that with that at all. I mean, from a societal level, we all are responsible for this by allowing people to come out and be just mediocre and not call them on it. There has to be a consequence for this. You have people who can't write a check, can't write cursive or understand it, who can't actually write whole sentences without it being shorthand for some sort of text. I mean, I don't want to be hard about it, but I wouldn't want to hire somebody like that. That's not somebody who I can work with. And this gig economy and it seems to me the last administration specifically, we lost jobs that required people to be able to have those skills. It was all about service industry. You push the button and it's a chicken and it tells you how much change you get back. That's just unacceptable. We have to want more. Right. And if we don't want more, then it's on us, honestly.
Absolutely. And I could not agree more. And that's why we need more people to be like you and I, where we are exposing this and we are holding people accountable.
I agree. If we don't shine the light on it, then people won't know what the problem is. I think people know there's a problem, but I don't think they know exactly where it's coming from and what it is, because it is hidden. You can't go up in the school. You can't see your child. It's locked. Your kids are locked in, right? My mom and dad could come visit me during the course of the school day. They weren't told they couldn't come. We had parent-teacher meetings, and they knew exactly what was going on. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if that's still the case, to tell you the truth.
Well, I'm not sure either. I do know that, we've had mainstream media. We've had the Department of Education. Oh, everybody's homeschooling now because you're at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm here to tell you, no, everybody is not homeschooling. Homeschooling requires great energy, time, and sacrifice of income, of your even what you do with your day. This school at home, no, you're not in charge of what the child is doing. You didn't create that lesson plan. The school is giving it to you. So there's a world of difference between public school at home or charter school at home and homeschooling. And I really wish people would stop just say, oh, we're all homeschooling, because no, you're not. You're not the one who is picking out the curriculum. You're not the one who is teaching the lesson. You're the one who is watching your child as they're on a computer doing somebody else's lesson plan.
Yeah, that also reminds me of just the technique of learning. You wrote it out, When I was a student,
Mm-hmm.
you had notes. Medical school is a little bit different, but same principle.
Right.
You went to a lecture, you wrote the note out. It was in your own hand. We had about 1,000, at least I did, 1,000 different highlights every time I reread it. There's something,
Mm-hmm.
that connection between putting it in, writing it yourself, and just looking at it on the screen. It's not the same.
Right.
I don't think you don't, keep it in the same.
Your brain, your brain has to develop much better when you read your own writing than if you just stare at a computer. And the computer, I don't know if you've seen the visuals, but there are visuals out there, Dr. George, and I would urge you and others to find those, of a child's brain that's been able to mature naturally through, a classic education. And then you have another child who's been hooked on these computers, and the brain development is horrible on the one who's been on the computer. And that's what we're seeing. So children's literal brains are being rewired
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much on the computer. But again, that's how they're being tracked.
Wow. That is just amazing. And you see the cause and effect. You can't argue a functional MRI where you're seeing how much blood flow
Mm-hmm.
goes to a certain part of the brain, and their
Mm-hmm.
attention span is gone. Their retention is gone. Unless you keep upping the ante of the stimulation, it's not working. This is medical abuse, child abuse, emotional abuse, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And
It is.
we need to take our power back. I'm so sorry. We're coming to the end of our hour, and I think we just scratched the surface. And as I said before the show, I'd love to have you back on, because what you have to offer is just priceless. How can people reach you?
Well, you can reach me on my blog. You're welcome to comment on anything that you see there. You can also send me an email, commoncorediva@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at Common Core Diva. I'm on USA.life as Lynne Taylor. I'm also on localactivist.org as Lynne Taylor. And I'm on MeWe as well. And of course, you already mentioned Facebook. So that's how you can find me.
Well, I hope people reach out to you, because everybody needs to tell their stories to know they're not alone, and also to really coalesce, because there's more of us than there are these people. They want to control us, but we have the power to withdraw our consent. I think that's the moral of the story.
Yes, it is. And I tell you, the next time we discuss a topic, I'll be happy to bring up a grassroots effort that needs parents to really fight back.
Oh, I look forward to that. So I'll have you back on ASAP. And I want to thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Dr. George. You are a wonderful person, and thank you for what you do.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for living in the solution.
Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.